Βρισκόμαστε στο σπίτι του πρώην πρέσβη της Παλαιστίνης στην Ελλάδα για να συζητήσουμε για όλα αυτά που συμβαίνουν στη Μέση Ανατολή και τον πόλεμο μεταξύ της Γάζας και του Ισραήλ. Καλησπέρα σας, ευχαριστούμε που μας υποδεχθήκατε στο σπίτι σας. Πόσο προετοιμασμένη είναι η Χαμάς και ευρύτερα η Παλαιστίνη για έναν πόλεμο διαρκείας?
I don't know exactly how they are prepared, but all the Palestinian resistance in Gaza is not only Hamas actually. And I think they were prepared. That's why they had the first resistant attack against the Israelis on the borders, the military points, checkpoints that was separating Gaza and, let's say, the occupied Palestine since 1948. I think, to what I hear, that they are prepared, and still they are launching rockets against some Israeli cities. And yesterday as well, the Israelis tried to invade from a certain point from Khan Yunis, and they shot, I think, 2 tanks with some rockets, and then they fled, the Israelis, back to the borders. What I hear and what I know, not personally, but from because I'm not from Gaza, I'm from Ramallah, that they have a big tunnels and beneath Gaza, and they are well prepared. They have a lot of ammunition that they were getting through the tunnels from Egypt to Gaza, the Egyptian border tunnels over there.
Προβλέπετε ότι θα υπάρξει περιφερειακή ανάφλεξη λόγω του Ιράν?
Well, nobody knows actually what's going on. Let's wait and see. First of all, it depends on the Israeli invasion on the ground, if it's going to happen or not. And I think that there is a miss and differences inside Israel, inside the government, inside the army. Many of the soldiers over there in Israel, they are not accepting the idea of getting into war again against Gaza. And there is differences between the defense minister, the chief of staff, and Netanyahu as well. So I don't know if Iran will get into it. Depends on how things will go against the Palestinians in Gaza. But let me tell you as well, it's not only against Palestinians in Gaza, it's going in against the Palestinians in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Since this morning, there were 3 Palestinians shot dead in Ramallah area, in Jerusalem camp. And yesterday, there were about 9 Palestinians shot dead as well. Since the beginning of the operation in Gaza, let's say before 13 days, since that time, there are more than 90 Palestinians in the West Bank. So the issue is that they are not considering Hamas only the Israelis. It's against all Palestinian people. It's against the identity of our people. It's against our existence of our people. I stand with my people. Yes, of course, I'm a Palestinian. And whether I do have differences with Hamas or not, and yes, we do have differences with Hamas in the PLO, but Hamas is a part of the Palestinian people. Hamas, it's a national resistance movement with an Islamic vision. It's right that they have a coup against the PLO in Gaza a long time ago. But in this time, you cannot stand except with your people and with your national resistance.
Why do you consider that
they are fighting for our aspirations? They are fighting. The people in Gaza, including Hamas and other factions, because Hamas is not alone fighting in Gaza these days. There is Jihad al-Islami, there is Fatah as well, there is the Democratic Front. Everybody of these groups of the resistance, Palestinian resistance, is fighting. Hamas and all these factions, at large the Palestinian people, the 2.5 million, were in an open prison for 20 years. So what do you expect?
Για τη Δύση, η Χαμάς είναι τρομοκρατική οργάνωση. Ο πρόεδρος των ΗΠΑ, ο Biden, μάλιστα τη χαρακτήρισε χειρότερη από τον ISIS. Τι απαντάτε?
They are like ISIS, not Hamas. Okay, the USA army is like ISIS. Because if you remember and go by history, you can remember well all the atrocities that the United States took against people, starting from Laos, Vietnam, Cuba, Algeria, Syria, Iraq, Somalia, Balkan, Palestine, everywhere, everywhere, and America, Latin America as well. So they had all these atrocities they are violating, and they were violating during their all the past period, the international law and the United Nations resolutions as well. And they intend to ignite war in Afghanistan, now in Ukraine, for the purpose of their hegemony in the world. And this is to save as well the collapse of the economic system that is collapsing in the United States, and to maintain their economy from the another side, and to confront as well the rising powers of China and Russia. So Hamas has nothing to do with ISIS. On the contrary, they have their Muslim ethics, they have their Palestinian ethics, and they are a resistant movement. They are not ISIS. We are against ISIS. And Hamas was against ISIS as well. So how they can be ISIS? They fighted ISIS in Syria, Hamas. When ISIS attacked the Palestinian refugee camps in Syria. And all, let's say, the Syrian and Iraqi movements as well stands with Hamas. They are against ISIS and Daesh. Who created Daesh and ISIS? The Americans and the Israelis, and everybody knows that. And even Hillary Clinton talked about that. So everybody knows that these were created by the CIA. Like they created Taliban, like they created Osama bin Laden. They always want to create an enemy so to provoke the world. As you know, they were using the communist phobia. Now they want to use the Islamophobia. Now this is Hamas phobia. But no, there is no connection between Hamas and ISIS.
Γιατί μέχρι στιγμής δεν έχουμε ακριβή αριθμό ομήρων?
I don't know really, but the Israelis and Hamas said that we have between 200 and 250 hostages. Among them, there are high-rank Israeli soldiers. And before yesterday, they have released 2 hostages. And yesterday as well, they want to release another 2, but Israel refused to have them through the Red Cross. I'm sure that you have heard this. And by the way, it's not a war. The Palestinian resistance, they're not an army. Okay, it's a genocide against the Palestinian people at large. The 4,741 up till now, are they from the resistance guys? They are all civilians. They are all civilians. Yesterday, just within the past 24 hours, 400 people were killed by the bombarding of the Israeli planes. Okay, so it's not a war, it's a genocide. This is occupation. This is occupation and colonialism that we have been facing since 75 years. And in particular, after occupying the rest of Palestine in 1967. So what's going on now? It's a violation against even the humanitarian law, against anything that is related to the United Nations resolution and international law. It's a genocide against our people at large. These people are fighting, and when they are bombarding, is there any missiles against the anti-craft missiles, for example? So who's fighting now? Who's fighting? The Israeli airplanes that are bombarding Gaza every day. They have put all the houses to the ground. They have turned all the civilian houses into graves in Gaza. So this is not a war. This is a genocide against our people. A genocide. It's a crime of war.
Ο ρόλος της Τουρκίας μέχρι τώρα, για την Δύση τουλάχιστον, παραμένει θολός. Τι πιστεύετε ότι επιδιώκει ο Ερντογάν?
Well, let me tell you something. Regarding Turkey or any other country, we respect all our relations with these countries, and we like to see that all countries are standing against the Israeli invasion, let's say genocide, brutal invasion against our people. And Turkey has its own interests with the world, with the EU, with the Americans, with the Russians, with China, and even with Israel. Everybody knows that. Like Greece. And we look forward always that all these countries, especially in our region, in the Middle East and East Mediterranean, will stand for the principles of peace and stability and security in our region. There is no way to stand with stability and security and peace if you are standing on the wrong side of history, which I mean with Israel as an occupying power, humiliating the Palestinians, oppressing the Palestinians, occupying and taking this brutal invasion and atrocities against our people.
Φοβάσαι ότι ο πόλεμος θα επεκταθεί στην Δυτική Όχθη?
Again, let me tell you something. We are under occupation. And I think that you, the Greeks, know what occupation is. You have been occupied by the German Nazi during the World War II. It was, and then you fight it against this Nazi occupation. And we are paying the price for our freedom, dignity, and peace that we are fighting for all people of the region, all the people of the region. What's happening in the West Bank or Gaza, it did not start 13 years ago. It started, of course, to go back to history in 1948 when we were displaced from our homeland by genocides as well that were committed by the Zionist organizations. And then in 1967, they occupied the remaining of Palestine. 100 million were displaced at that time in 1948, to the diaspora. And since the occupation started, always there were violations against United Nations resolutions and atrocities and Palestinians who have been killed. More than 20,000 people were killed. 1 million get into the Israeli presence during the occupying West Bank and Gaza Strip. This is not the first time against Gaza, the bombarding. Before that, they were shelling as well Jenin refugee camp, Nablus refugee camp. I mean, these cities are in the West Bank. What they did in Jerusalem as well, by the settlers over there, the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. This is what's happening. It's a colonial occupation that have been there since 1967 against the West Bank and Gaza, and even against our Palestinian people living in Israel now. There are 20% of the population of Israel are Palestinians who remained there in 1948, and they are facing apartheid. And they are facing killings by some mafia groups who are supported by the Israeli police and army. So it will end when Israel will end its occupation. So there will be no resistance. Let Israel apply the United Nations resolutions, international law, and abide with them, and end its occupation and apartheid against the Palestinian people according to the basis of the two-state solution, which is an international consensus, as well approved by Greece or supported by Greece over here. And then it's the only path for peace and living in security and stability. If they don't want to end this, they have to face resistance everywhere, not only military resistance, political resistance, legal resistance in the United Nations and the United Nations organizations all over the world, our political resistance by the PLO, and this military resistance that is a right for any people under occupation. It is our right. And then some EU members come and say that you don't have the right to resist. Why? And you are terrorists if you resist, where Elam and the other national resistance Greek movements during the Nazi occupation terrorists, they were fighting for the freedom of your people and your country. So every people, every national movement has the right according to the international law and according to the United Nations Charter. So we will continue in fighting the occupation. We have nothing against the Jews, but in these days, of course, who are supporting. It's not only an Israeli invasion and atrocities against our people, it's totally supported by the United States, because the United States have its interest in the region to implement what they call the new Middle East. And that's why there are warships in the Mediterranean. That's why 2,000 of the Marine guys came with Biden. That's why Biden was proud to say that he is a Zionist. That's why Blinken, his foreign minister, was proud to, now he remembered that he is a Jewish. Although, again, we don't have anything against Jews. We respect Christianity, Muslim, Jews, but we have something against the Zionist enterprise, against the Palestinians who came to our land. These Jews from Europe, because the Jewish question was not solved in Europe, and you, the Europeans, didn't want the Jews at that time to stay in Europe. And it was arranged by America and Britain at that time, even with the help with Hitler, through what was called the Havara Agreement with the Zionist International Organization, to bring these Jews to Palestine in what was called the colonial immigration.
Τι πρέπει να γίνει με τους Παλαιστίνιους χριστιανούς που βρίσκονται στην περιοχή?
But I'm a Christian, and I'm a Christian, by the way. I'm Christian Orthodox, and we have been there before the Muslims in Palestine. And now we live as brothers. We are one people. We are components of our, Arab civilization. And it's an Eastern civilization, which one of the reasons that the Americans do not like. It is one of the reasons that the Americans is trying to create hotbeds all over the world, because in a way or another, they believe, these neoconservatives in the United States, with what Samuel Huntington was talking about, the clash of civilizations. And Israel considers itself, it's a part of the West civilization, not a part of the East. We are from the Eastern civilization. We are not in the West. We are Eastern people. We are in the East, as you are in the East as well. You are not a part of the West. Once President Papulius told me, when I came and submitted my credentials to him at that time in 2013, he told me we are part of the West. That's why we have many common values and principles and traditions and cultures, the Palestinians in particular, and the Greek people. We were both under the Ottoman Empire, by the way, for 500 years. You remember this? And you fight it, and you gain your national independence. Unfortunately, we did not gain our national independence, because then the British mandate as an occupation came, and then the Israeli colonialist enterprise came, and then we were part of Jordan. And in 1993, we reached to a peace agreement, interim peace agreement with the Israelis, with Prime Minister Rabin and Yasser Arafat, the Israeli Prime Minister, who this government now in Israel, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, Netanyahu, the fanatics, the far right, they killed him dead. I mean Rabin at that time, because they don't want peace, because they don't believe in peace. They believe in this Israel kingdom, or according to the biblical version and according to their Zionist ideology, to have this kingdom of Israel, not only in the historic land of Palestine, parts of Jordan as well will be included, part of Egypt, part of Syria, and Cyprus. This is the map that they show these days. Ben Gvir and Smotrich, these Zionist religious who are governing Israel these days.
Μπορούμε να μιλάμε για την επόμενη μέρα στην Γάζα χωρίς τη Χαμάς? Πώς το οραματίζεστε το κράτος της ελεύθερης Παλαιστίνης?
I will prefer to talk about the next day, that the occupation is not there. The Israeli occupation is not there. Well, you are talking, I don't know why the Europeans have a story with Hamas. Why? What's the issue? Can you tell me as a journalist? What bothers them with Hamas? And before they used to be bothered by Fatah as well. Why? Why the Palestinian resistance in general is bothering the EU? Of course, I know why it's bothering the Americans, because the Americans, of course, and the British, who have prepared for Balfour Declaration in 1978 for the sake of the Zionist movement, didn't want in any time a Palestinian state there. They didn't want for the Palestinian people to practice the principle of self-determination like any other people on the world. But the Europeans, I don't know why. And this contradicts as well the principles and founding principles of the European Union that calls for freedom, democracy, human rights. So why they are bothered? Why they are not bothered with the atrocities with Israel? Since 56 years, nobody was able to punish Israel. Nobody was able to put sanctions on Israel. But they were able to put sanctions on Russia. They were able to put sanctions on Iran. They were able to put sanctions on South Africa when there was an apartheid in South Africa, and against Turkey, and against any country that don't abide and don't go with the European policy. But unfortunately, the Europeans has no independent political vision. They abide with the United States political. They are followers these days. They are losing their independency and they are paying the price.
Τι σημαίνει για εσάς το κράτος της ελεύθερης Παλαιστίνης? Θα είναι ένα αμιγώς μουσουλμανικό κράτος ή ένα κράτος όπου χριστιανοί και μουσουλμάνοι θα συνυπάρχουν μαζί?
Of course we were living in Muslims and Christians in Palestine since history. So we will remain in our land. We will not live in our land. Unfortunately, my family, for example, grandfather made a mistake when he left Jaffa in 1948 during the forcible displacement by the Zionist gangs at that time. But we will not leave. We will not leave this time. And this is what the Israeli occupation and the Zionist movement wants. They want to displace our people from North Gaza to South Gaza and then to Egypt. But there is a stance, strong stance, by the Egyptians against this as well, and then to as well impose forcible displacement of our people in the West Bank to Jordan, because some of them, the Israelis, and according to their vision, that Jordan is the state of Palestine. It's not there in the West Bank. They call it Yehuda and Samara. This is a part of the kingdom of Israel that they believe in. But for us, peace is practicing our self-determination according to the United Nations, implementing the United Nations resolutions, implementing what the international law and the international humanitarian law call, and to have our own independent state of Palestine on 1967 borders, which is only 22% of our historic land of Palestine. We have recognized Israel on 78% of the total historic land of Palestine, while the partition plan that created Israel in 1947, 181, gave Israel only 50% of the historic land of Palestine and 50% to a Palestinian Arab state. But Israel have been created on 78, and since that time, where is the responsibility of the international community to create a Palestinian state according to Resolution 181? There is a double standards. Now the Ukrainians have the right to self-defense, for their self-defense, for example, and the right to resist. And the United Nations resolutions should be implemented there in Ukraine. And the Russians they take sanctions, the Europeans, against Russia. What about Palestine? What about Palestine? And what about this colonial occupation that should be ended? Why? Why these double standards and hypocrisy of the EU and most of the European countries, of course? Before yesterday, they were in Cairo for what was called the peace conference.
How do you see the Cairo conference?
Well, we are so surprised by the stances of the European Union. First of all, they want to declare Hamas as a terrorist organization. This is not acceptable for any of the Arabs. This is not acceptable. Hamas is part of the National Palestinian Movement, although they are not part of the PLO, but we have a coordination between the PLO and Hamas. And Hamas have recognized the political program of the PLO to have a state independent, sovereign on 1967 borders. Nobody wants to throw the Jews in the sea. And nobody of us is anti-Semitic because we are Semites. The only enemy for Semitism is the Zionist movement, not we. We are the Arabs are Semites. So how we can be against ourselves? This is foolishness that is going around, a propaganda that the Jews are the only victim in history. Why? Okay, of course we condemn the Holocaust against the Jews, but not against the Jews, against all Europeans. More than 35 millions of Christian Orthodox people were killed by Nazi Germany. Not only Jews. I'm not sure about the number of the Jews who were killed, but they were not, they were not against them in Europe because they are Jews, because for economic and political reasons. We don't have time to talk about it. But in Cairo, they stood, this was one of, let's say, the main issues that the EU want. And second, to denounce the resistance in Gaza as terrorism. They didn't want to call about ending the occupation to talk about in the final communique. Why? Why? Why we don't have the right to have an independent state? Only on 22% of our historic land of Palestine. And this is the only way that we can live in peace and side by the state of Israel. But apartheid should be ended as well at that time. But in Cairo, it was very obvious that they were very hypocritical. The Europeans there, including Mr. Mitsotakis as well.
Τι πιστεύετε ότι σηματοδοτεί η επίσκεψη του Έλληνα Πρωθυπουργού στο Ισραήλ?
I don't know why. They have, he considers himself an ally with Israel. Israel is an occupying power. Israel is committing crimes against humanity and war crimes. I don't know, but maybe he thinks that Israel will save him one time or save Greece, and this is a very wrong idea regarding, the conflict or dispute with Turkey, that we don't have anything to do with it, by the way. We always need to have good relations with Turkey and good relations with Greece, but we cannot understand this policy that Mr. Mitsotakis is implementing regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. He has to denounce the Israeli atrocities. What killing about 5,000 Palestinians Mr. Mitsotakis doesn't care about? Doesn't care about? Bombarding hospitals, bombarding an Orthodox church in Gaza, Mr. Mitsotakis does not care about. What does he care about? About the Israeli lives? We have the right to live. Nobody is talking. They are talking about the right of Israel for self-defense. What about us, the Palestinians? We don't have the right for self-defense. We don't have the right to live as any other people in the world. So what is doing Mr. Mitsotakis? I don't know. Well, it was investigated, and everybody knows that. The Evangelical Church knows that, and the bishop of the Evangelical Church was there. The Red Cross in Gaza as well investigated, and some journalists investigated. To investigate what? Bombarding a hospital. So what? And now they are threatening most of the hospitals that they should be evacuated. Can you imagine? When they called them. The Israeli Shin Bet intelligence called these hospitals. And they asked that these hospitals should be evacuated in order to be bombarded. What is this? The Nazis did not do this. The Nazis did not do this. Yesterday, within 48 hours, 400 people. Since the morning, they are still bombarding. What do you want? To put all Gaza on the ground? 1.1 million have left their houses now to South Gaza. Gaza. There is no water, no food, no electricity, no petrol. Okay, yesterday they get in with maybe 20 trucks, I don't know what, but there should be a humanitarian corridors open, according even to the war laws. They are not opening, they are not accepting. On the contrary, the United States rejected the draft resolution that was submitted by Russia and China during the past week, in order to implement the issue of humanitarian corridors and to end the occupation. The only way for all this is ending the occupation, the colonial occupation, the expansion. This is a state of war, unfortunately. They cannot live without war. Since 1948, they started with it, with colonizing on the expense of our rights and our land, and as an indigenous people. And by the way, this is what is common with the United States, the Americans, because America as well was created on the expense of the origin people of America. And both, over there is white supremacy, and in Israel there is a Jewish supremacy, even against the Palestinians, Christians, and Muslims who are living inside Israel as Israeli citizens. And what about us, the Christians? About our sensitives, the Christian sensitives and the Muslim sensitives, that always are targeted by the Israeli occupation army and the settlers, the colonial settlers, who their number now is about 800,000 in the occupied West Bank. This is illegal. This is illegal according to everything, to international law, to the Europeans does not see this. They does not see the expansion. What they see then? Just to care about an alliance with Israel? This is unethical. They are not holding their political, ethical, and legal responsibility towards the Palestinian people who were suffering and still are suffering from occupation, apartheid, and these continuous atrocities against our people. We are people. We have our culture, our history, and we have the right to live.
Πώς αξιολογείτε τις αντιδράσεις των αραβικών κρατών απέναντι στην κρίση στη Μέση Ανατολή?
Well, yes, we are satisfied with the reaction of our world. By the way, demonstrations are taking place in the Arab world every day. Yesterday, I'm sure that you saw on TV, not only in the Arab world, in all the world. In Greece, there were tens of thousands demonstrating in Santigma, in London, in San Francisco, in Chicago, in Berlin, in Sao Paulo, in India, and everywhere. People stand on the right side of history, and they know what's going on. And we are satisfied with the stances of the Arab world countries, especially Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, and Syria, of course, and Lebanon, everybody. President Sisi did not accept what Biden came for, to open the borders for the immigration or displacement of Palestinians to Egypt. This will end the Palestinian. This is what they are targeting, to end the Palestinian cause. And as well, the king of Jordan.
Στην Ελλάδα έχουμε πάρα πολλούς Παλαιστίνιους και πολλούς μουσουλμάνους. Πρέπει να φοβόμαστε κάποιο τυφλό χτύπημα?
Why you are concentrating in the issues of the issue of Muslims? Islam is a religion, as my religion, Christianity, is a religion. As Jews, Judaism is a religion. We don't combine things together. We are in a national struggle with the Israelis, with Zionism. And let me tell you something. Before 1948, we used to live in Palestine very peacefully. Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And they were neighbors to my grandfather from Jaffa before we left. This is not the issue. And Islam is not the issue. Islamophobia is something that the Americans have created, as I told you. They have created this, and for the sake of this, they have created ISIS and Daesh. They and the Israelis. Why should I not be afraid from some fanatics from the Israelis over here? There are many Israelis and Jews over here. And let me tell you something. Just he was telling me, my friend, that there were 4 of our Palestinian community over here who were threatened by phone before yesterday, they went to the police. Why should I not be afraid? But we have the people, the Greek people with us. Because, of course, they understand the meaning of freedom and the meaning of the national struggle, because you were in that against the Nazis and against the junta, the dictatorship that took place. You fight it for your dignity. And you stood again and again, I say, with the right side of history. The governments change. I don't care about the governments in any place, by the way. This is the public opinion over here in Greece is very clear and very well known. In every city in Greece, there are demonstrations with Palestinians. And you know this. In every city during the past week, like in the world as well. There is public opinion, even in the United States now. Even in the United States, and even some officials of the Foreign Ministry of the United States, they submitted their resignation to Mr. Clinton, not accepting the American policy in the Middle East. And in France, they are doing the same. Maybe in Greece there will be the same, I don't know. If Mr. Mitsotakis insists on this biased policy with Israel.